We're very glad to be able to introduce to our community the managing director of the Wine Scholar Guild. We have been reimagining the wine education system.
So we are definitely trying to rethink and lead the way to a new way, not only of tasting wine, but also how we really approach and communicate about wine. Intimidation factor of wine, and that wine is often, consumed. It's really a cultural currency, and it's kind of become this thing that people either know about or don't, and there's insiders and outsiders, and we're looking for a much more inclusive approach. Ultimately, the goal here is to bring the taster back into the equation.
You're actually building a program where you hope it to make it more professional to sell wines.
But what we are doing is we're reshaping the language around wine, to be able to rebuild that more holistic view that is all about communication of wine. And ultimately, I feel like that is going to help people not only enjoy wine more, but sell wine.
What we can find the difference, what is actually is going to bring different for us. Hi, Preston. How are you today? Thank you so much for to accepting to be part of the Vino Visionary podcast. We're very glad to be able to introduce to our community the managing director of the Wine Scholar Guild. We have been reimagining the wine education system. We're very curious to know about that. But before we're talking about these in details, my first question for you, Preston, tell me like who you are, like just so people know a little bit your story behind in the wine industry, how we get involved. Um, and then we can actually talking like the new stuff you guys bring. Because we are very excited to talk about it.
Great. Well, it's great to be here, Priscilla. Thank you for the invitation. Just very briefly, so I am Preston Mohr, and I'm currently managing director of Wine Scholar Guild. I've been with Wine Scholar Guild for almost 4 years, and I come from a wine education background. Got into wine really through tourism and hospitality here in Paris. I've been living in France and in Paris for over 20 years, and originally I'm from the U.S. Came here as a student, not of wine, of art history. So was attracted to the beauty that France offers, first in the art, but then later through gastronomy and wine, and was just completely, enchanted by the world of wine and the intricacies and the cultural, implications of wine here in France and in Europe, and that led me to, learn about it, throughout the world. So that's what brought me into the wine world.
Oh, and then tell us, like you guys, like rethinking very much the whole education model. Um, so we know as always education has been doing one way, but you now bring a different perspective, and then now we all very curious to know what this new perspective is, and we wanted to understand it more because you already launched it of last week. It was last week you launched it like the
Correct. Yeah.
tasty course, and then in the next year we actually have a diploma coming in. It's completely different what it has been done in the past. So what do you notice, what do you see, and what's the difference between the past and what you're offering
Sure.
now?
Yeah, so we are definitely trying to rethink and lead the way to a new way, not only of tasting wine, but also how we really approach and communicate about wine. I think that, as you know more than anyone, wine is in a difficult place right now, and we're up against a lot of challenges, not only in the vineyards, but also in terms of wine consumption. And for all of us to continue to spread the word about wine, we need, of course, customers, and we need people to be drinking wine. And we feel here at Wine Scholar Guild that traditional wine education has served a wonderful purpose. It's built a great foundation on which we sit as an organization as well. However, there are a lot of opportunities for us to take it to the next level. We feel like Wine Scholar Guild is really in a unique position to be able to be that voice to really enlighten the next set of students. And it's really all comes down to communication. I think something you talk about a lot in the work you do is, this intimidation factor of wine, and that wine is often, consumed. It's really a cultural currency, and it's kind of become this thing that people either know about or don't. And there's insiders and outsiders, and we're looking for a much more inclusive approach that allows students at all levels to communicate more clearly and understand how they can give a more holistic description of a wine, and really bring the taster. I think ultimately the goal here is to bring the taster back into the equation. If you look at, the traditional kind of systematic approaches to tasting wine or analytical approaches, you are often really objectifying a wine. You're trying to project, what may be the correct answer for, whatever exam you're sitting, etc. And it doesn't always do a service to the wine. It doesn't always allow that taster to really go away with a clear way to communicate about that particular wine. And often those descriptors or aromas or things that we're using to speak about wine are not necessarily going to go and sell wine, whether you're doing that at the wholesale level or, in a restaurant in front of a customer.
I like the last phrase. I just wanted to repeat that. So you actually building a program where you hope it to make it more professional to sell wines. Yeah. So
Well,
like
indirectly.
the skills is it skills to be able to be more empathy with customers, and hopefully that's engaging more the sales. How does it work?
Yeah, so the curriculum. So I'll just back up for a minute. So essentially, what we've just launched is what we call the WSET Tasting Diploma. So it's a 9-month hybrid program that's taught for the most part online, but there is an in-person component. We're having an in-person summit in Paris in April of 2026. So next year. So the 80 or so students that will be part of that first cohort will start in January. So that is really the highest level of the tasting programs that we will be offering. We started with that one first because we were the furthest along in building that, and we also knew we would learn a lot from the first time offering this, and that would help us really shape the intermediate and the more beginner level, which are coming in 2027. The tasting diploma that we'll launch next year has been something we've been working on for over 5 years at this point. So even before I joined.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's really been a product of a lot of thinking, talking to industry leaders, professionals, but also to consumers. Something that we do really well here at Wine Scholar Guild is since the beginning, we have been very much focused on teaching about 50% to consumers and 50% to professionals. And if you know a bit about our programs, they're usually quite advanced and quite in depth. And so we tend to have the professionals we have are very, high level, people right in the industry looking for specialized knowledge. But then we interestingly have this extremely active community of non-professionals that just want and have a thirst for wine knowledge. So we've been able to really study those two sets of customers and to understand over the years of what is missing. And I think your first question was about, are we teaching people to sell wine? There aren't true, commercial or negotiation skills included in the curriculum. But what we are doing is we're reshaping the language around wine. And I think the first thing in the first day of class is really to be, thankful for the systems that have come before us and the programs that have trained all of us, but to, in a way, kind of forget about them for the moment and to really lay everything out clean and flat and to be able to rebuild that more holistic view that is all about communication of wine. And ultimately, I feel like that is going to help people not only enjoy wine more, but sell wine. And that's really what wine is about. we've treated wine as this fast moving consumer good for too long. And we look at it as a commodity now. We talk about price brackets and, premiumization and all of this stuff. And it's okay, everyone's got to make money at the end of the month. I understand it's the same for us here at Wine Scholar Guild, but we must cease to stop communicating about wine like that, because it strips it of its soul, and
Mhm.
we forget why we even came to it in the first place. And I think that's what's happening to consumers, and certainly younger consumers are not seeing the value, the cultural value and the historical value that wine previously was able to teach to previous generations. And that's really, more than I do on this topic, because you've been doing so much work around it. So that's really what led to this program.
So you wanted to adapt to the language to the culture behind of the wine to be able to speak with these new generations where the way we did before is not talking to them anymore. So we need to adapt it on the other way. But how actually worked if you can put it like a model, how was before as tasting like a traditional, how we learning how the tasting on the traditional way, how we pretty much most of the, because most is the wine professionals or the wine business here watching this podcast, how then they was teaching before and what the elements you bring in new. So what's the new elements is actually to understand the process line, what's the past, what's the present, and how your vision for the future.
Sure.
And actually on the tasting program, so like
Sure.
what we can find the difference, what is actually is going to bring different for us.
Yeah. So I think that if we were to really simplify that and break it down, is that we've all learned to taste in a very rational way. And why has tasting rationally been easy? Well, because it's certainly not easy, I'm saying, but it's been easier because there's a right and a wrong answer. It's analytical. It is, you're able to mark exams accordingly. You're able to teach at scale much more easily with these systems. So we are, like I said, very much sitting on a foundation that was built by Wine Scholar Guild, but also by other educational providers that have come before us, and we're certainly not critical of that. We're just saying that what we would like to do here is really balance that out with a little bit more intuitive and kind of emotional value to wine tasting, and really saying that there isn't necessarily a right or a wrong answer. We're moving away from this black and white situation, and really the core of what we're doing with the actual tasting approach. So encapsulated within the tasting diploma is the WSG tasting approach, and it allows, for an example, would allow a taster to understand how to taste two wines of similar quality and to be able to really describe them more with nuance and more precise vocabulary that actually speaks to the consumer, and that will be able to be transmitted and like you said before, help sell wine. I'll give you a very concrete example. I'm here in France, drink a lot of wine from Alsace, especially some wonderful Rieslings. If you take two great quality, top producer Alsace Rieslings, you taste them side by side, those analytical tastings on paper will look really similar. So just to know,
Okay.
those both
Very,
those,
very
those wines are both high acid, have very similar aromas, similar flavor profile, and
the bracket
that's
of
great.
quality as well.
Exactly. And that's wonderful. But what we will empower students with is really giving them the ability to look within, but also to taste and to be able to really draw links more closely to the place where that wine came from, the people who made it, and be able to more accurately describe those wines, which ultimately will drive enjoyment and sales of wine.
And what's about the diploma? So you diploma is going to be next year. Yeah, it's not available yet. So the or it is available. Sorry, I
Yeah,
understand
so
was
the
next year.
diploma is actually the program we just launched. So
Is
basically,
it
it's
together, the diploma and the TAC? I thought it was separate.
correct.
Sorry.
Yep. So
Okay.
just to recap again, there'll be three levels. The diploma is the program that's open now for registration. That starts in January. So there's an application process because seats are limited for this initial cohort. We will be teaching mostly online, but then, as I mentioned, there is a mandatory Paris summit. So that will start January of next year and run for 9 months. So that is the top level of the tasting programs that we'll be releasing. And then in 2027, there'll be a more intermediate level using the same framework, but a little bit more accessible and perhaps slightly more consumer focused, that certificate, which will use the same tasting methodology. It will just be a little bit more simple, and easier and quicker to complete. And then coming that same year into 2027 will be a 2 to 3 hour course that will teach the introduction really of this method, that will be at a level that pretty much anybody who wants to try wine, they don't even need to know anything about wine, they just need to be open to wanting to try wine, and that will be released in 2027. And that's also using the same methodology, but will be much more accessible.
Yeah, that's good. So we're speaking in different ways, languages, etc., to get in different levels. What is exactly you gonna teaching on this new diploma? Because in your website you say reimagining wine education, wine tasting. I think it was reimagining wine tasting.
Yep.
Correct me if it was wrong.
No, that's correct.
So tell us. So the diploma taste is part of the diploma, but there's going to be more things on the course. Kiwi bringing new next year. But what is going to be? What's the new? What's the difference? What's it have been done by? But even by you or by competitions, I don't know. Like, tell me. I think the diploma is quite new. I don't think we had the diploma before. Um, but you need some. You wanted to really go towards what is needed at the moment for the wine industry. I don't, from my understand, and that's why we have been speaking quite a bit lately. You have been bringing lots of new ideas and new formats and new stuff to try different things in the industry to hopefully that's helping everybody grow. So what is going to be included in this new path for the Wine Scholar Guild for starting next year, completely in a renewal phase? Start something completely new. You probably, it's very exciting, but it's at the same time the risk as well because you don't know how the acceptance is between the people. It's always an innovation to have a little risk, and that's the feeling you probably see you all guys feeling on the valley. But tell us a little bit like what's is the new, what's you challenging, what's is actually the exciting, but also if you can share the challenges so we can actually understand the two parts and then like what are you expecting from the whole diploma.
Sure. So I think to answer the first part of your question, Priscilla, was really about what we're teaching that's different. We start the program, the first four, I would say 3 to 4 modules are really based a lot on neuroscience. So really how the brain is reacting when you're drinking wine, and really how can the taster understand neuroscience behind, wine drinking. This is something that no one has really done. I mean, it has been done, certainly. There are many scholars doing this at an academic level, but in terms of incorporating neuroscience into wine education, at a broad level like this, no one has really done that. And so we're the brain is obviously the biggest part of tasting, and we've completely forgotten that as well. And
Absolutely.
we've kind of turned things. I think my understanding of wine education, and I think education in general, I'm going to bring this, to a broader stage, is it's usually for the student, it's about understanding what is expected of them and actually learning more about that than actually the subject matter. So when you go to university, you read the room and you figure out, what do my teachers want, and how can I get the best grade? But it's less actually about the the subject matter itself, and there's all this stuff that kind of prevents you really from going deeper into the subject matter because of this, very rigid kind of educational uh, framework in which we all live. And I think ultimately this has done a disservice to most students of wine, in that we kind of adapt our answers, we adapt our learnings based on what we think is expected of us, and that's to pass a certification or to get the highest score. Certainly, you do learn a lot of things along the way, but here we're going to say in this program, this is factual neuroscience, and this is what is happening when you're tasting wine. But we're also then, I would say, the next step that comes into is really the emotional side of wine, and that is unquantifiable. And so we're bringing back that. We're basically saying, this is how it is. This is what happens when you taste. But then there's also all of these unquantifiable, joyful things about wine that have been completely forgotten during, educational courses in wine. So this, and then to answer kind of your second question, is
The challenges.
the challenges. Yeah. So the challenges definitely are there, but we don't see them necessarily as challenges. Like I said, we feel like this is the way in which wine is going and needs to go, not only to capture a larger audience and interest more people in wine, but also for our diehard students and professionals that are always looking for more. And I think that we're trying to satisfy both here by introducing wine and kind of breaking down those very rigid ways of looking at wine to incorporate people into drinking more wine, and definitely that intimidation factor, that you talk about a lot in your work, and, trying to break that down. Of course, what I've just described is our highest level. So it's certainly not a beginner level program. So it may be intimidating to some people. But as I mentioned, there will be two much more accessible levels that will be introduced in the next 2 years. So challenges are there. There are people out there who are a bit, I would say, upset, maybe frustrated with what we're building, because they've spent their entire lives doing things one way. They think they've reached the pinnacle of wine education through various programs, and they don't necessarily want to bend and to learn something new. That's understandable. When anyone innovates, there are always people out there who are going to challenge it, and that's totally normal. What we would encourage is constructive challenging of what we're doing, because that will help us shape this program in the future. But completely shutting it down and saying that this is crazy, or is not true, or isn't beneficial to the taster is of course just not not realistic. So
I guess you said something, and I wanted to talking about this kind of when you innovate something. That's the pain for a lot of people has been building your part of building a system is like a son. Now I understand that better than ever. And then I'm respectful, because imagining like it's your son and you need to let it go your son to build something new, and this can cause some challenges. And I think that's pretty much it. But that's not stop us to make the world better, because someone always is going to come in with fear to make the world better, to engage more people. We need to understand the motivations of people, why the people buy wine, because it doesn't matter if you worked in the past, if we already see the sales decline and a lot of business going out of business. So we can't really just keeping doing more of the same, because it's not, I can't really see gonna change the results. Usually if you do the same thing, the results is gonna be the same or even worse. So what are you bringing now? You try to understand the consumer's brain, but also the brain that they make it professional understand what's happening in your brain when you're talking about wine and when you're tasting wine. So that's how they can understand the people better, and in the communicating the wine in the way doesn't look like intimidated, then it looked like more a relationship building. So by that step, you probably is more close to a sales step, because without um, a, a connection, it's almost difficult to go into the next step is a sale. So for what you said, you bringing that connection for wine professions and consumers. Is that all right? That's all right. Like making more connections between social connection, I guess, like when you talk the same language.
Absolutely. I think there's definitely a lot of that in what we're trying to do. Yes, this is an advanced program. However, ultimately the goal is to get people interested in wine again. I mean, let's just break it down. And this will be followed by two, more accessible programs, the intermediate and the beginner level programs. And that's our long-term goal, is to get people to really let their guard down and forget about what they may have learned about wine in the past, and to approach it with a really fresh view, and looking more at things that are the building blocks of wine too, in a slightly different way, and especially in this tasting approach, we look a lot at texture. We like to prioritize that's really more, an energy and vitality in a wine, and really what makes a great wine. It's not just 20 different aromas or 20 different flavors or a price bracket. It's really about your reaction to it. And this tasting methodology will really give the taster at all three levels those keys and the proper vocabulary and the ability to recognize that when they're tasting wine, and then to be able to go and move forward and learn whether it's just completely selfish and they want to learn what types of wines they like or what they'd like to buy more of for their cellar, or whether it's to go on and communicate about wine in their daily lives as wine educators or as trade individuals. And that's really, what this is about. And so it's opening wine up essentially to a wider audience through a different way of approaching it.
I have a question. So now we understand the whole process, but how are we going to evaluate it? Because we all have in our mind the evaluated people on the logical way, right? So that's how many points you get out. That's how we get the right answer, the wrong answer. So you get these. I don't remember the terms anymore. But anyway, so every school have a different terms, but can be numbers, can be names, whatever. You get this or that or that or that for how many points or scores or whatever you make the exam or something. So if the approach is more personal, like that's how I understand it in a way, because we're talking about joy, about what's making you the feelings, the neuroscience behind. It's becoming less logic to evaluate it too, because you have said that it's not. We don't want it to say wrong or right answers, because that's something we being feel like outside of the cycle a lot when you have the wrong answers, and that's probably a barrier instead of help us to connect it. So you change all those small things that's being built in the system. We're evaluating then logical way, but now with all these new steps you adding in the course and in the diploma, how people expecting to the evaluation system you have been, because it probably is another challenge as well to figure out that between your team, you have a two master for one who work with you, and then probably to know all these stuff and bring it that in the reality, it's another challenge, because you can have a good idea, but when you put it actually in the paper, it's needed another work. So that was how we're going to evaluating
That's
students.
a great question, Priscilla, and definitely one that a number of students have asked already, who are so used to going in, sitting a wine exam, and having it be, a certain number of points, etc. We are, of course, issuing a certificate at the end of this course, so there will be a need for evaluation. So let's just remember, tasting is subjective. It doesn't mean that something that's subjective does not make it untestable. We're not looking through this program to tick boxes of finding whether you found a specific aroma or you picked the grape. I think wine in general, there's a lot of these kind of parlor games about getting together and blind tasting wine and getting the vintage and getting the grape and getting the producer and all these things, in wine circles that we all participate in. However, that's really not the point. What we're trying to do here is to get students to engage with the wine really thoughtfully, allow them to communicate with clarity and more intent. So there'll be a series of different ways that we'll be evaluating the student. There'll be homework assignments, there'll be a midterm exam and a final exam. And ultimately, there will be, some parameters, but we're not looking at wine tasting as this fixed thing. We're looking really more as this kind of intellectual and sensory experience. That does have some personal insight, and really getting people to think critically. So that's what we're going to be testing on is, did the student really look at this critically? Have they learned something about themselves? Have they learned something during this course that allows them to really go on and communicate their personal experience with a bit more clarity and intention? I
So
hope that makes sense.
yeah, so just to clarify, to see if I understand it well, you're going to be personalized evaluation answers. Instead to have one answer, should everyone answer the same, you're going to look at each answer and just to see how much work you then try to put in there to connecting folds together, more than just like that's the correct answer. Everyone needs to have that answer.
Correct.
That's the way it
Correct.
works. Like a bit more personalized, kind of like more towards the future, because we know the education is going to be personalizing stuff. So
Yeah.
you already working towards that way, like he understand the fish. You need water to be able to be talented and successful, where the monkey need a tree to be able to be successful. If you put it the fish to climb the tree, so probably the fish is gonna fail. So it's kind of a thing, the theory behind, because
Yeah.
I'm just asking, because that's something I think I always found it a little bit like, what education put the fish to climb the tree? If it's a fish, they're not gonna be successful at climb the tree, but they're gonna be successful if they put in the water. So it's kind of the way you guys look in education now.
Yeah, so I would say it's important for us at this stage to maybe talk a bit about Wine Scholar Guild and our history. We've been around now for 20 years, and well, we do in our classroom settings, we have about 120 schools throughout the world that teach our programs. They will include wine tasting as part of the curriculum of our core programs: French Wine Scholar, Italian Wine Scholar, Spanish Wine Scholar, etc. However, we have been primarily focused on theoretical knowledge here at Wine Scholar Guild, and bringing in that cultural component to wine and the historical component, because we feel like that really is the bedrock of all of these wine countries and regions where we work and teach to. And so with this program, we're looking to, like you said earlier, it's like we're moving away from a right and a wrong answer. What we're strictly not doing in this program is saying, here's a wine, analyze it, systematically, tell me what aromas are here, and how it tastes, and its aging potential and whatnot, and write me a tasting note. Uh, that's just basically black and white. And we're not going to go through and just tick boxes and say 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. What we're doing here is looking for the student's ability to really critically think about the wine, the
Awesome.
whys. Why does it maybe taste like this? What's leading to this? And to really conceptualize a wine's structure, its style, and its emotional impact. And that's what we're testing too. So there'll be a lot more writing, and less just simple rote memorization. We're not looking for people to regurgitate facts, um, yield figures or different types of just pure facts here. We're looking for that critical thinking and that student's ability to reflect, personally, and give their insight into the wine in a meaningful way.
Awesome. So you incentivize us to be more critical thinking, to be able to go in there, research, get a different knowledge, and then putting that together to building something
Yep.
completely new. That's awesome. I was
Yeah.
absolutely very exciting about this new program. I guess it's a game changer for us who are looking for something different in the wine industry. And definitely something here would be more new stuff for us to learn as well. I guess it's pretty easy now with AI find many factors like you said, but the critical thinking, what's making things together, putting things together, probably something skill we need more. And also I really like the idea of the evaluates the system of the tasting in a different way where we're taking the person like the taster on the central. Is not, you don't care about what they feel, what they actually true about then what they actually feel the wine is all about, to tick the boxes and learning what's there and then memorize the words. And I think that's probably going to create more creativity, I guess, in the wine industry, because most of the wine tastings notes is pretty much the same. It's almost like copy and pasting because it has been pretty much the same words we haven't used it. And it became more repetitive more than ever. That's probably going to create more authenticity, I guess. Because if people can using their words, the how they see, the how they have that freedom, you probably see less and less tasting notice being so similar. Like if you get bottles in the bottle shops, I work in bottle shops in the retail space, and the most of them they have pretty much the words used by 90% of the wine industry. It's pretty, is it one another? We have a one word different, but mostly it's a very
It's a
copy and
limited
paste.
vocabulary,
Yeah.
a limited
And I think that's
lexicon.
just going to allow you to the vocabulary be more abroad, I guess, so people be able to talking and then different ways, and then probably engaging different people as well, because there's vocabulary engaging with some people can really enjoy that vocabulary, but also there's so many other people over there, so many other community there. It's not being drink wines because we use the same vocabulary for these ones here. So that's really very much the aim, yeah. So that's by having the freedom of these people, and they bring the authenticity on the table, the taste of the people who's doing the course, you probably be more, they're gonna feel much more confident to talk about wine as well, as because they can use their words.
Absolutely. Yep, you've summed it up quite well. And I think as much as I do that if we continue exactly how things stand today, we'll only go further and further into this, treating wine like this niche thing where we're just going around in circles with the same words, the same descriptors. If you look at much of like you said, the tasting notes and wine writing today, it's repetitive, and we must open that up to let in a next generation of wine drinkers and get them excited. Find out what is it about wine that excites them, and gets them excited. And and that will ensure our longevity, all of our jobs, and ensure that wine continues to evolve. There's so many. If you look at traditional wine education as it stands today, it's a bit like going into a museum. It's a sort of, I'm going to walk and look at the pretty paintings. Oh, that's Sancerre. That tastes like this. Or that is Puy Fumé. Oh, that's like this. And we think about these as static things that are written in textbooks that cannot change. But it's the exact opposite. And I live here in France, and this is everywhere in the world now, but especially in a country like France that's been making wine for thousands of years. There's the most exciting wines are being made right now today, and wine vignerons and winemakers are doing fabulous things, and they're going outside of these norms. They're combating climate change. They're looking at consumer behavior, and they're changing the way they make and sell their wines, and they're confronted with these issues. And there's also a changing wine aesthetic, and what we like and look for in wine is changing. People want more freshness. They want lighter alcohol. They want lower alcohol. They want lighter wines. They want, things that marry with different types of foods, and they're adapting. Wine and the traditional trade is adapting as well, slowly, but education hasn't necessarily followed suit, and we feel like we're in that position to be a voice and to really show how this program can speak more accurately to the wines of today. If you see how many wine makers are doing things outside of appellation systems now, why is that? Because they don't necessarily care about having that stamp of that official appellation, because they want to make wine that they like drinking. And that's the thing you hear the most from winemakers is, oh, taste this, I'm making this because we just really love it, and I wanted to drink it with my friends, on the weekends. And they're often then slowly adapting their final wines in order to suit their changing palate, but also what they're seeing around them, and what people want ultimately.
You just said something. It was in my head. It was about the wine. It tastes like this because it's still wine, that the population, blah blah blah. And with the climate change, this was start like this was in the textbook before. It's very hard because of the climate change. Everything is changing, including the tastes of these things. So it's going to be very difficult for a lot of feed producers to keep it the same profile with the climate changes and stuff like that. And you may have this, I don't know, this wine for tastes lemon, and then maybe there's tasty passion fruit in some year, just because the weather was complicated, and then they starting to losing that with the climate change deal. Like many people are already talk about that, how we can say this place or this type or this appellations need to tasting like this and that. With the climate change, it has been challenging. It's one of the biggest challenge in the wine industry, because the grapes is all priming material to make the wine, and that condition for the grapes has changed, and he's changing quite a lot. So it's this logic approach of what they should looking for, and they should taste it.
Mhm.
It's limiting as well.
Yeah, when you
And
move away from black and white and saying this is right and this is wrong, what we're really gaining here is a flexibility that this educational system in which we're implementing can change over time and can adapt to the wines that will be consumed today as it in 20 years. We're not saying that this is how this wine should taste or it will taste forever. We're saying, well, this is how it tastes today, and giving you the tools then to interpret it. And that will change in 5 years. We may even use the same wine in this course next year as we do in 2030. And the way people interact with it may totally change. It'll be a different vintage, be a different expression of that place. And that is really what it is about. And if you dig really deep into your own personal background and how you got into wine, I would really challenge everyone to think about that, and not just like, oh, I found a job in the summer working at a bottle shop or whatever, think about, well, what was it about that interested you? Was it the people you met? Probably. Or was it the feeling you felt when you were able to, I don't know, pair food with the wine and see that joy in the
It was
customer's
that. I
face?
really liked the pairing food. The wine
Yeah.
was one of
And
my biggest motivations.
those are those goosebump moments that really go back to what wine is all about. And that is why all of us are here. And that's what we have in common with one another, and what we've forgotten over the years as we've driven towards this commodity product, and starting to treat wine like an inanimate object that is traded and invested in and, moved around like this, like any other product that, you know, that's where we've gone wrong, but it's not too late to change it. And yeah, we hope that this will excite some people to go back to that joy and that personal connection as well. That is so important with wine, because wine tasted alone can be very good, but wine tasted with others and spoken about, and really looked at in a different light is so much more enjoyable.
Right. So thank you so much for all the explanation. I really enjoyed this conversation because you bring different approach. I'm very excited to see the next steps, how things is going to change, and you'll be amazing to do a podcast later on to see like the before and after, to see what is actually happening there in the future. I'm glad you try to fix the problems with the community. Like this whole community, we try in different parts in the world to try to bring something new to try to help the wine industry, and we need more people thinking that way. Try to not be just attached to what worked in the past, but try to see the signs. Try to how we can get more people enjoying wines in different way in their language, what we can do different. And I think it's just for you to be on one of the first one, at least the one I know. Sorry if it's happy someone else there listening and have to try something different, but the one I know as such a well-known school in the wine industry has been bringing something different and putting on the table is it's making a probably pretty much all, at least me, very proud of it to see things different and changing, and then going towards a different path where we hopefully that get more wine and more people stables and more people enjoy and drink it, and they don't let it the one being relevant. So I would say thank you so much for that. But also I wanted to do every guest here, we always challenge your guests with the three advices they want to give to the wine industry. So most of the people who listen to this podcast is from the wine industry. So we have a lot of professionals, sommeliers, business owners, and so that's the people who listen to us. So we wanted to know, so everything you're doing now and everything you see the wine industry, and you have a lot of experience because you work in this education space for a long time, but and you have seen the different cycles in the wine industry, and we all know everyone needs to play a role, we are all pieces in putting together this large puzzle, so we need a lot of contributions in the wine industry from different parts. But we wanted to know from you, would like it to you give me three advices how we see the wine world, and what are we actually running for the future. What do all of us wine profession need to open up our eyes to do better? What's the three things you think we need to rethink? And the education, that's pretty much your expertise in the wine industry. With your voice to be one of the leaders of the education in the wine industry, what are the three things you wanted to advise all wine professionals about the wine education?
So that's a great question, Priscilla. I would say keep it very simple. Meet the customer where they're at in their knowledge, and don't over speak to them. I think that's something that we tend to all do, is we do all these trainings and certifications, but we go way too far with the end consumer, and we can intimidate very easily that way. So really speak to the person you're trying to sell to, whether that's in a trade or wholesale setting, whatnot, with at the right level, and get them excited. So that's really very, very important. I would say also number two is that let's work together and not against each other. Just like any industry, there's a lot of clashes and people that don't get along and talk trash about one another, but we're all here to do the same thing. So take that opportunity to pull somebody aside and just speak to them and from your heart and tell them kind of where you're coming from, and you'll make friends along the way. And then I think that leads me into my last point, is that don't forget that wine is something that's made by humans, and is completely natural, is evolving, and is changing just like we are. And we cannot treat it like a fast-moving consumer good. We have to bring it back to, the place and the people where it came from. And those would be my three takeaways.
I think bring people back, like bring
Yes,
people back on the table. Like let's bring people on the first two plates. I think we need to bring the wine industry to be more humans. I guess
totally.
sometimes we forget about that, and I think that's
Yeah,
one takeaway I take. And then, of course, like meeting where they are at, I think that's absolutely amazing. I love that as well. But they sometimes, I guess, I was actually a post something on my Instagram, and there's someone who said like, yeah, Priscilla, I love that, because sometimes we forgot, yeah, we are all people when you talk about wine, and you need to respect and be contributing and then be working together on this. And sometimes for incredible, that's how it sounds. Some people really forget that, like some people really put in the product first and the people after. I know for a lot of people who was start to think, we already started to put it people first, human first, but it's something that really touched my heart and in your words, and I just wanted to say yes, let's building a people, a
yes,
network of
that's what
people,
it's
like
about.
let's get a people.
Without the people, there's no wine, there's no industry, there's no community. So yeah, let's not forget that.
Hi, Preston. It was amazing to be able to hear from you these words you're putting on, and it's a lot of your work in the 5 years to bring something new to the table. I know with you and the whole team probably have a lot of efforts to what we can bring different to engage more and to try to help the community of wine, to be able to achieve different paths in this, yeah, this declining or this crisis, whatever you want to call, but this moment, I guess is better to say that. In this moment here where things are looking dark for a lot of people, um, but it's great to you bring different solutions, different things, and for that, I would say congratulations. I'm very happy to hear your vision, to hear where you're heading on, not just you, but the whole Wine Scholar Guild, heading to a more human wine industry. It's, I guess it's at least for me, it's making me very proud. It's very proud of for me to be able to talk with someone who believe we can actually bring the people first, the emotions, the hope, the things we have lost in the last decades or so, and then to understand the need for the connection. It's the new currency. Is the connection is the new currency now, and we need to do something to connect. So for that, I would say thank you so much. It'd be a pleasure to talk to you. It was a pleasure to be able to this video and the previous conversations with you. I'm definitely just a last thing. People get interested. We talk about a lot about this new diploma. So just how they can find it, how they can go towards someone from your team or the
Sure.
community, just to give a little direction before we
Absolutely.
finish this podcast.
Yeah, so they can find everyone listening to this is absolutely welcome to join us on this journey, and we'd love to have you with us in that first cohort of students. So you can find more information on our website, which is winescholarguild.com. And you can also email us. Best thing to do would be to email us at contact@winescholarguild.com, and we can answer any questions you have about the program. You can download on the webpage itself the detailed curriculum for this and really understand a bit more about our reasoning, why we created this, the gaps that we see, and what we're proposing really as solutions. That's all available on the website, and you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm not big on social media myself in my personal life, but you can contact us also on Instagram at Wine Scholar Guild is our handle, but I'm also on LinkedIn personally, Preston Mohr, so you can reach out and connect with me and contact me directly that way if you'd like to. But thank you for the opportunity to chat more with your listeners about this program, and we hope to see many of them in Paris next April.
That's very easy. I think that's the very easy part. Everyone's going to Paris. Thank you, Preston.
Yeah.